Hello, welcome to October 1st and to Power Up Live with Lisa Solomon. I'm the founder of Athenium Collective, which is an online education platform really dedicated to to advertising, marketing, and media. And we bring together industry experts who share their knowledge and expertise and apply applicable real world information for you. It's all online, all on demand. It's a great website and a great platform if you want to learn more skills and enhance your career in the advertising business. I am going to be live today with Brian Mathena, who is an executive and has been at a lot of different companies, both on the sales side and the agency side. He's currently with Camelot out of Dallas, Texas, although he is based in Los Angeles. And I'm just waiting for him right now to join. And I see him waving. So let's just give him a minute to join me. And we will have a fun conversation about sharing insights. Here he goes. Takes a little time. Brian, yay.
Hi,
You
can
did
you hear me
it.
okay?
Yeah, I can hear you
Great.
great. Thank
I've
you.
got my earpiece in, so I just want to make sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm so
My
excited.
pleasure.
I do this Instagram live, try and do it every Thursday. And I love the opportunity to talk to different people in our business. And, it's like crowdsourcing knowledge. I feel like there's so much you can learn from so many different people who have different points of views and different backgrounds. And our business is so dynamic. It's changing all the time. And there's so many different aspects to it. Like you could start in one part of your career and end up somewhere totally different. And I think you have had an incredible career and have done so many different roles across so many different companies. And I wanted to share just some of your insights and your experiences and advice to other people.
Sure, and let's say have, not have had, because we've been doing this a long time, but we're not done.
Yeah, you know what? That's actually really true. We are definitely not
We
done.
have, not have had.
That is very true, but we have been doing it for a long time. And I think, why don't we just start with kind of, sharing a little bit about your background, how you even got into the advertising media business. We'll kind of start with that.
Yeah. I've lived in LA for about 20 years now, originally from Texas. I can't really imagine living anywhere else, even with all the challenges that California is experiencing, but everywhere has their own problems. And I actually got into the business. It's funny, like sometimes I say it's kind of like a Mad Men type story, or it's a very like old school advertising way. And it's kind of interesting because I think advertising was still very kind of done in an old school way when I got into it. And I mean, you know that because you've known me
Yeah.
since day one on my first job, but and then it quickly changed thereafter. So I actually have a degree in advertising art direction from the University of Texas at Austin. So I was a creative advertising student, but also had a general advertising education as part of that. And I always say it was like going to, it was this very strong advertising program in the nation and still is. And I would say it's kind of like going the ITT tech of advertising. Like it was very vocational. Like I had media planning class and I had account management class.
Wow.
And I had creative classes and I had like advertising law class. Like it was like the departments of an ad agency in a bachelor's degree.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, very vocational in that regard. And obviously advertising is a major market business. I'd grown up in Texas and Dallas was really is the center of advertising largely in Texas. Very client rich market.
Definitely.
I didn't want to live in Texas anymore. I didn't want to live in Dallas, which is funny that I now work for an awesome Dallas-based company. Didn't want to move to New York. I don't want do cold weather. So what had happened is all of my friends who are going to go work as creatives moved to New York. And then all of my friends who were going to work in media moved to Chicago because they all went to go work for Starcom. And so I actually took a little bit of time for about 6 months or so after school. And I ended up moving to Los Angeles, didn't have a job. Had a friend who lived in Southern California, moved here, literally no job. and very stereotypically was a lifeguard in Southern California and
Love it.
kind of bummed around. And interestingly, like I actually used the alumni network with school.
Okay.
And the alumni network actually ended up connecting me to a guy by the name of Miles Turpin, who is an executive creative director at Saatchi in Saatchi, Los
Oh,
Angeles,
wow.
um, who didn't go to University of Texas, but somehow I just met with a bunch of people, and I was at this point showing my art direction book around town, trying to go that route. Had been very close to like actually getting a creative entry level job at Saatchi and Saatchi in San Francisco, but that
Yeah.
was like .com boom, so all that was falling apart at that point in time. And old school style Miles said, "Hey, look, I think you need to do some work on this book. I think I know some people who can help you do that. Why don't I see if I can just get you a random job here in the meantime to pay the bills?" And I was like, "That sounds fantastic." And so I worked in the mailroom at Saatchi and Saatchi Los
Oh,
Angeles,
wow.
and which I'm saying that's the very madman sort of old
Oh, I
school,
did not
like
know that.
yeah,
That's so
very
interesting.
like LA agent style, right? Like you start in the
Yeah,
mailroom, and a mutual friend of you and I's, Rob Tucker, came to me one
of
day in the
course. Yeah.
mailroom and literally said, "Hey, we have an entry level opening in the interactive media department," and so we called it interactive back then. And he's like, "I think that you should look into it." And they hired me, and I've worked in digital media from day one, in LA and London ever since.
That's where I met you.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Day one
very
on that job
interesting.
is where you knew me. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. That is so amazing.
yeah.
I love
Very
that
old
you,
school.
yeah, exactly. And I also love that you actually went to school, even though that was what, 20 years ago, and you actually learned real practical skills. And it's so
Yeah,
funny because that's exactly why I created Athenium Collective,
yeah.
was to have people like you who've done the job for 20 years teach real practical skills, because you don't get that much in college anymore. I actually personally went to UC Santa Barbara, and we only had a degree in communication,
Hmm.
and there was nothing practical at all.
Yeah.
But you learn on the job, and I think it's
Hmm.
interesting right now, especially with COVID. How do you learn on the job when you're not around people?
Yeah.
That becomes a lot more difficult.
Yeah. I mean, this is a business I think that's been changing so much since I started in it that learning on the job is what you do. And I mean, learning on the job is a lot of things, right? Unless you've got some sort of very vocational certification based thing and you sort of, do the same thing day in and day out. But yeah, this is a business that's always been one about learning on the job. And yeah, it's harder to, learn on the job now when you're not around people. But I think, there's still, I think, the world is adapting for ways to do that. And I don't think we've sort of seen the full way that that's going to come to be. But I think obviously that's where things are going to move that way, right? At least have that
Yeah,
option.
definitely. What do you like about the advertising business? Like,
So it's interesting. So, I wasn't sure what I wanted to major when I went off to college. And I just remember one day in the house, my mother said, "Hey, have you ever thought about looking at advertising?" I was like, a senior in high school or something, because she just sort of saw how tuned into like culture I was as a kid, right? I had stacks of magazines of all types in my room all the time. And I watched a ton of television. Like I was just a big, aggressive, like media
yeah,
consumer. And so I think, for better or worse now sometimes, digital and connected media drives culture. Like it is culture,
yeah,
right? Like you can make $1 million a year as a YouTuber or a TikToker
yeah,
or something, So I
yeah.
think the fact that it drives culture, like I said, for better or for worse, but and I think it really allows now, and I think it always has, allows you at least my personal experience is that it's allowed you the opportunity to kind of connect both sides of your brain,
Hmm.
like the logical
And the business
and
part.
the creative
Yeah.
part of it. And I think that creativity has really evolved in it used to be about how to make a great print ad and how to make a great television spot. Like when I was a creative major in college, like your book was basically
Yeah.
like a bunch of print ads that you'd concepted and done. Like what good would that do you now? Like
Oh my
nothing.
God, totally. That's so
Nothing.
interesting. Yeah.
But now it's about how you creatively use technology to reach people, which is because it's become harder than ever to reach people, right? So I think that's the good part. I mean, the flip side of that is that I think there's some really serious and valid concerns about this business now, and the fact that it has such an influence in culture. And, you know, I'll just say that I think there are certain places where I have to spend money for my clients, and it certainly pains me to do that. Uh, but yeah, so I mean, I think it's at the center of, how who knew what like VC funds were before like the internet? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah, no,
now the
totally.
average,
Yeah.
it's just at the center of business and the culture of business, I think, both in the US and globally. So that's really interesting. It's just at the center of that in a very different way than it ever was before.
Yeah. And I think what's so interesting was when I look back when we first started in interactive, right?
That
You
bird is
know,
really funny.
I know, which is really funny. Like the campaigns that we were working on back then were about experiences, about connecting with people, about very like brand oriented type of camp. Like there
Mhm.
was no data, there was no, you just wanted people to view it and maybe click, go to your
Yeah, click
website,
maybe,
drive
right? Before
traffic.
that, the
Yeah.
only measurement you had was reach, right? Panel-based reach.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. And I think through just, and back then we were innovating, we were creating what today is sort of standard practices.
Yeah, I mean, now what is standard practice? What is standard practice one
Well,
day is gone the next. But uh, yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about this and just thinking about like our conversation today is another person who we also know who I've known for a long time, Luke Callis. I
oh yeah.
remember said to me and a colleague lunch one day or something. I think we were at lunch and we were having a conversation. This was also many years ago, but we were even commenting then about how much has changed and how things are so different and how hard it's to keep track and how kind of daunting that was. And he kind of said something I kind of just have just always remember. He's like, yeah, but you know what? Who knows it better than us? Because we've always been doing this and we've been doing it from day one, which I thought was really funny at the time. It's sort of like it just let you step back and kind of into the confidence of doing that. But like now that's very different. You know what I mean? Like what it takes to keep up to date and to keep modern and how is much harder. So like you can't just rely on that. Like, well, I've been doing this from day one anymore because now so much more happens in a day than it used to. But yeah, like you're right. I mean, we were joking yesterday when you and I were talking. Like it
Yeah.
used to be every campaign was like $30,000 3 months sponsorship, $30,000
Sponsorship,
three
exactly.
months
With a little,
sponsorship.
you
Yeah.
got your logo that would click
Mm-hmm.
through. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
we created a little custom page with something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I remember those days. Yeah. It was fun
Yeah.
though. It was
Yeah.
great.
I mean, it was lovely. I mean, I've always just been very, very lucky, and I always consider myself very, very lucky in the people I have gotten to work
Mm-hmm.
for, and the people I have gotten to work with. And I think that the one thing that hasn't changed is how important I think relationships are. Because I'll tell you, like every job I've ever had, I went to work for the most part, with just thinking of a couple exceptions in my head, maybe only one, was someone that I'd either worked with before or that I knew, or was a friend who was doing something new and wanted me to come with them to do it. And so I think those relationships, it used to be you just relied on relationships. People took your word for it, buy this thing or whatever. But I think relationships are now more important than ever, but in a different way. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I think that part has not changed because it's really been. I'm very grateful that that's been a big part of advancing my career.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I mean, knowing you as long as I did, I think that's one of the things, that's why we're having 20 years later this conversation, is because of the ability to build relationships. And I think, when I look back or all the times I've ever met with you, what I love is your ability to be transparent, to like not play the games and like, hey, here's what I need. Here's like this idea of creating a solution together. And that's what makes the difference about, creating good campaigns, creating great advertising. All of that is about coming together because for a common purpose,
Hmm.
even though we're a buyer and seller sometimes.
Yeah, and I think obviously we think about it in a buyer and seller capacity because like that's kind of how we originally met, and just
Yes.
the areas we've kind of worked in for a long time. But I think, uh, yeah, and the transparency piece, like we've talked about before, is so much different than it used to be. Like it used to be like, hey, I don't. have a lot of results. So I feel good about this. I feel like it worked. So thumbs up, I'll do it again. And
Yeah.
now, to your point, you get to have very frank and realistic conversations with people. It's like, look, okay, like we've come into this in a very educated fashion, that we've analyzed it and feel confident that it's going to deliver business results. But now we have such an unending capacity to measure business results really in a way that we never were, because everything is now connected, that facts sort of speak for themselves. If
Yeah.
this doesn't deliver for my business, then I don't really have the option to buy it again, because I can't take something that's not proven to build my business back to my client and say, you should do this.
Yeah,
Right. So I
absolutely.
think it's made that transparency so much more at the center of everything that we do. And I think that's back to my point about relationships. It's about, it takes the kind of bullshit out of it, right? It's like, no, there's gone are the days of this, like, okay, what's my kind of negotiation strategy on this, right?
Hmm.
They're going to like, it just doesn't work like that. It's like, okay, cool. Like, I'll try it. I've been convinced that this is going to deliver results. And if it does, great. I want to buy more of it. And I want to share as much of that information about those business results and why it worked with you, the provider of whatever that solution is, so that you can then make it better and help me use the
Yeah.
thing that you're an expert on to deliver even better business results. And if it doesn't, hey, it didn't work. Let me share some stuff with it about you so that your platform becomes better and you can think about how to make a better solution going forward, right? So there's just so much more available information to inform it. And I think, sometimes it's hard to tell someone like, hey, I'm not going to do that again, or we're not able to move forward
Yeah,
with that or
it is.
whatnot. But you can be honest and straightforward and say, look, but this is why, and just be transparent about the information. And then, that only helps everybody, right?
Well, yeah,
So
I think it helps on the other side, where if somebody's telling me my solution isn't working, getting that type of feedback then gives me an opportunity to go to my product people and
yeah,
my company and say, hey, I can't get more of this money because it's not working. And
yeah,
I think, again, that goes back to that sort of win-win, because at the end of the day, we are all in this together trying to, whether you're either side of the fence. Now, it's interesting because you've been on both sides. You've been, on both agency, you've worked at AOL, you've done a lot of different
yeah. From
parts
a
of,
media perspective, I
yeah,
guess media buying
yeah.
and selling, I've worked on either side of the coin. That's correct.
And how do you think working, I've never worked at an agency. Like everything I've learned from working with people who've worked at
Mm-hmm.
agencies. How do you think that helps you as somebody who was on the sales side?
Um, it's interesting. So I remember the first sales job I got. I was actually going to work for a very good friend of mine. I had just moved back from London, where I worked at a really big holding company agency there for a little bit. And I had been doing the agency thing a long time, and I was just really burnt out, and I just I didn't want to do that anymore. And a very good friend and mentor of mine was going to give me a job in sales, and I had to go. This was actually the first job I had in sales was at News Corp, of all places, selling a tablet-based daily publication called The Daily.
Oh yeah.
And it was very much kind of ahead of its time in that way. It was basically a magazine that had been produced to take advantage of the technology available through the screen of a tablet, an iPad. And the publisher I was interviewing with at that point asked me, he said, what makes you want to go into sales? And I said, well, I've always been in sales. I don't just push a recommendation across the table to my client and they say, great, where do I sign?
Yeah.
I have to sell that recommendation. And so I kind of, for me, having done both, it's very clear to see the commonality in that regard. Sometimes people will joke like life is sales, and it's like, well, yeah, it is. It's about,
Always.
business is about convincing people that something's going to deliver a specific outcome, right? So, for me, I think I never thought I would come back to work at another ad agency. I was like, I'm never doing that again. And one of the reasons I did that is I just work with the smartest, most wonderful group of people collectively, probably that I've ever worked with holistically. But for me, I think the challenge I had working on the sales side was really interesting. I think what I found is that when I was working on the sales side, and I mean, I was working at a really big company, selling a lot of different things, much of which we buy a lot of that from that company at my job now. But I just felt like I wasn't learning anything anymore. I thought, I'm not learning anything anymore, et cetera. And I just feel like every day is kind of on repeat. And it just felt kind of rote. Mm-hmm. And so I work for an ex-client of mine, is who I work for now. And basically, I saw it as an opportunity to come work with people who are a hell of a lot smarter than I am, at a lot of very technology-based, data-driven areas of this business, which is really what it is. And have ended at what is I don't think of as an agency. Oh, I think we're just having a little bit of a connection.
Your video kind of keeps cutting out a little bit.
Yep. So what I was going to say is I myself is less of working an ad agent, more of a consultancy.
More of a consultant, yeah. That you have to be if you're.
Yeah, that's what I think we do.
Yeah, exactly. I think that totally makes sense. You were cutting out a little bit as you were talking through that. So you're sort of in a place where you're working with a lot of incredibly smart people. You were saying that this gives you an opportunity to learn all kinds of new things. Going about learning new things, like what are some of your go-to resources?
That's really interesting.
That was a big sigh.
I mean, I think like the marketplace is the best place to learn, I think. We depend on the marketplace in a whole different way than we ever did. Can you hear me, Lisa? I can't see you very well, but I can.
Is something happening to your internet connection by any chance?
It's unclear. See, this is the world we live in. We all depend on this one type of connectivity. And when it doesn't work right, look what happens.
Go ahead. Saying. Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Yeah, your internet's going out for some reason.
Some sort of connectivity issue. Look like it's going out on my side, but there's some sort of.
Well, it is on mine. But
something's
anyway,
not cooperating.
Right now it just works. So if you're at the same time, that might be doing it. Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you were asking me about like, and I honestly found that like the marketplace is kind of the best place to learn and rely on it to learn in a lot more than we used to, because I think the marketplace has become so much more consolidated and we spend less places than we used to. And so each know how to do before, but you have to teach yourself. I think there's so much of that. I mean, I see every day, every week at my job now, like I said, the incredibly smart people that I work with are presented with something that they didn't know how to do yesterday, but they have to figure out how to do now. So I think, and we rely on our marketplace partners for that, right? And again, that goes back to my point about like sharing data and making everyone better. It's like, hey, let's share with you what we're seeing so that we can help solve this together and maybe find a solution where maybe there isn't one yet. So, it used to be like, what would they tell you? Read the trades, like whatever. I think the trade route has become so antiquated, and I think some of the ones we kind of came up with are basically rags. But I think really what it comes about, it's about learning about obviously business, and it's about learning about technology. And I think the more you can educate yourself on the from the macro to the micro ways that technology affect people's lives and how they consume things, where, when, and how they 100% of the time is where, how, and when they want, the better off you'll be. And I think, it's less about educating yourself like on the advertising business, and it's more about educating yourself on the sort of, on-demand technology experience that we all have on the device we're talking on right now, every minute of the day, right? So I think educating yourself on that is the best place to learn, because honestly, like how to leverage that for a marketing opportunity is ultimately, at the end of the day, now is going to be so data and technological driven. I mean, I will say, like, I think that the decision making that we do on a day-to-day basis at my job now is, I'd say, the hardest parts of what we have to figure out on a daily basis are technologically and data driven. The sort of quote unquote like media decisions, if you will, that's the easiest part. I think, I also feel bad for the creative industry right now. Like, how hard is it to be when you have all this data that you never had and all these things, and how to take that data and all that response information and translate that into like what people will respond to, et cetera. And how do you test creative in advance for that? Like, that's incredibly hard. But yeah, I mean, I think so much of what we do is I think the business is learning by developing its own solutions every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think data is such an interesting part of it too, because if you're not a data scientist, or you're somebody who, figuring out how to take data and make it meaningful is, I would say, one of the hardest things to be able to do. Like, I mean, I've got my Google Analytics, and my different data sources as I even build a business, but putting that into practice to be something that I can do something with, that's hard.
Yeah, I mean, data's no good if it's just data, but data that gives you insights is where it's really at, right? And I think we do a lot of that at Camelot. I mean, we do massive amounts of data warehousing of our clients' customer data, and use a lot of technology platforms to visualize that information to help give us insights about it. And I mean, that is so at the core of what we do, and I think such a marketing differentiator for us, because that's really, really hard to do.
Yeah.
And it's super important, to your point, because it's like you can stare at data all day, but if you're not organizing that in a way to help you decision appropriately, then, and there's so many different ways to look at the data, right? So you're like, you could tell you one thing, but you could look at a different one, and it tells you another thing.
Yeah.
And then you can easily get into analysis paralysis, right? So I think a lot of times what we do is we like can look at the data, but sometimes you can kind of like over optimize yourself, so to speak, right? So you kind of have to kind of drill down on it, but then maybe back up a level when you're making a decision.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating right now where we are in terms of the ability to have data. But I love the fact that there are so many platforms now that help you, like you were saying, to visualize the data.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what's so great about where we are, even just in terms of even like starting a business. There is a software as a solution for everything. And that really helps. So you don't necessarily have to, there's a lot of tools and resources that we can have to be better at what we do. Thank God.
Everybody wants to sell you a subscription to something.
Yeah, exactly. It's so true.
The world is about to now. It's, you don't buy something once. We want you to subscribe to it every month.
Yeah, exactly. I have some really good subscriptions though that I do like, I have to say. So that's awesome. What advice do you have for people who might want to get into this business?
I mean, I think it's hard to kind of give any one type of advice, but I would say be prepared to be constantly learning. And I feel like that obviously feels like such a trite answer. But I mean, that's the reality of it is, and be prepared for it to be hard. I mean, it's hard. Like, my job is hard. This business is hard. Be prepared, honestly, for just some people to suck. Like, like this business has not lost that part. Let me tell you that. And, the advice I would say, and you and I've talked about this before, is like what I'm finding is my advice would be like really good at one to a few things, right? In this
Hmm.
business. Like, I feel like clients are getting so much more involved in the operation of their marketing spend. It used to be like everything was outsourced to an ad agency, and like all you did was like bring a presentation and they made a decision, and then you just like went and did everything. Not the case anymore, right? Client, back to your SaaS comment, like all of your SaaS contracts with platforms and technology platforms, those are all client direct now, right? Because clients realize like all that, one, for privacy and security reasons, all of
Yeah.
that stuff has to
Yeah.
live in house. Number two, like they realize that like they have to be connected to this stuff, and it's business critical for them to be. So they're much more involved in the operation of their marketing spend than they have been in the past. And what they need is experts. In the world, like I said, it's
Mhm.
become more technical and complicated. So like this idea of a generalist, I feel like is becoming less and less relevant. And I think over time, sometimes you kind of become a generalist, right? Because like you just have more experience with more things. And so at some point, and that's kind of what I've done in the job I have now, is start to kind of reset to be like, I mean, I think if I could become a generalist with a much more technical skill set, then I would say I've succeeded. But my advice would be like, you don't have to know how to do everything, but if you know how to do one or two things really, really well, I just think you're so much more valuable to the marketplace. You know what I mean? Like, because like I said, like, do you want someone who can come in and say like, I know about this platform, here's the data we're coming to selling about our business on there, and I know then what to do with this platform to drive a different or incremental business outcome, right? Like
Yeah.
when you had soft metrics, like I said, life is sales, everybody's a salesperson. Like, an account services person at a traditional ad agency was like, they took every meeting, they talked kind of about everything and whatnot. And now, uh, clients don't want to talk to those people. Like they want to talk to the person who's doing the thing and can tell me specifically exactly what they're going to do differently to drive better business outcome. So
Yeah.
I think be a specialist, not a generalist. That's just where I think things are headed, and I think you're better off that way. I mean, even my clients now, like the clients I work with now, are incredibly technically minded
Oh, absolutely.
over ways they used to be. So my advice in general would be like, that I would say that's it. Like, be a specialist, not a generalist. I just think that that's where the business has moved and is moving.
Yeah, and I think that and what that means can be different because the opportunities within advertising, marketing, and media are really vast. Like there's a lot of different ways you can go. And I think it's fascinating that I feel that people have so much more options and to try different things. Like you don't
Yeah.
know what you like until you start, maybe you start somewhere sort of general, start honing in on the areas where you want to go special.
Yeah. And I mean, like, and has always been the case and will always be the case going forward. Like, I think, if you find people who are really, really smart, like, go work with them, go work for them. Like, I guess as long as they're not assholes, but like, like, seek that out, and they always, how
Yeah.
the trope was always like, if you find somebody smarter than you, hire them.
Yes.
I'm sort of like, fair, and that's sound, business acumen, but also like if you find people who are smarter than you, like go talk to those
Work
people,
for
go
them.
work for those
Yeah.
people, like, learn from it. And I think also like, look, there's so much demand for technical talent, obviously, and whatnot, like that. I think companies are also invested in that. They have to help grow that talent in people
Yes.
because they can't get the technical talent they need fast enough. So I think like there's and I would always just like go work for good people is like the last advice I would give. Like, if you like, I've had jobs where I've luckily, most of my jobs have been working for really good people, but I've had some where I didn't. And I just think there's way too many opportunities to not work for good people.
Yeah. And I would also say, on the flip side is as you're starting your career, be the good person. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like that gets you so much farther in life. Like, treat people with respect, you know, uh, be trans, I see a lot of people who, unfortunately, if you get the bad boss, you might end up being the bad person.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
say
That's
the
very,
wrong traits.
yeah. Exactly. I mean, this business can always use more and more responsible, humble, and conscionable people. Like, especially like I said, with where it's going. So, if be that person is a great point. You make a great point.
Yeah, exactly. Because 20 years from wherever that point is, you want to be able to have these types of relationships with people that
Hmm.
you've worked with for 20 years because
Hmm.
you were a good person.
Yeah.
You're working with good people. And that's the
Hmm.
thing is like what I love, I think, most about this business is that it's the people.
Yeah.
I love
100%.
so many, the people we work with are just awesome, super talented, very creative, smart people. And that
Yeah.
alone is a reason to get into this business.
Yeah. And I think you're right. And I think that's the thing that I think we all kind of miss the most is being together and doing
Oh,
those things and everyone having to be on their own doing those things. And like, that's why I kind of think like everybody's thinking about like, oh, we're never going back to the office. Like everybody's just doesn't matter where you work and whatnot. I don't think that that's true because I think people want to solve things together. I think they want to achieve things together, celebrate that achievement together. Like I know for me personally, like I love being amongst and working with other people because I'd just much rather, to your point, like experience that with other people than experience it by myself. What am I going to do?
yeah,
Like, turn to the wall and say,
exactly.
great job, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And we've both been very lucky in that that we've gotten to work together and that we've gotten to work with lots of other really great people. I mean, I have so many friends, some of whom I count among my very best friends
Hmm.
and sort of, chosen family that I met when they walked in my office for a meeting,
Yeah,
you know?
I totally
And,
agree.
so I think that uh yeah, we're very lucky to have kind of a deep well of wonderful people to kind of draw upon. I mean, coming to my job now, I'm so lucky, like lots of friendly and familiar faces sort of like pop into my inbox, like
Yeah.
reaching back out on something. And it's like, I love that. Like, I love when a familiar name pops up. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I
just the
love
best part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree. I love connecting and
Yeah.
reconnecting. I mean, personally, I get so much of my own inspiration, my own learning from talking to other people. Like, I just get inspired by what people are
Hmm.
doing, how people are thinking. And that
Yeah.
makes me just better at everything, including, my own creating a business that is all about crowdsourcing knowledge. So,
Yeah. I mean, you've always been that way. I think you've always just been a very sort of interested person and interested in the things you didn't know and how to do them better and whatnot. So, yeah, I would agree. I think you've always sort of been that way.
so it's fun. I'm glad I found a business that actually does that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, let me know when you're ready to teach a course. Well, I think,
Okay.
there's always room.
Maybe
Uh,
maybe after tax season.
yeah, exactly. Get through tax season. That is
Yeah.
very true. Only to start
Yeah.
the new one.
True.
I want to be in the interest of time. I want to thank you so much, Brian, for joining
Of
me, for
course.
sharing your insights. Really, really appreciate it. The nice thing is we'll post this and people can come and watch it whenever they have time. But I am thrilled that you did this and it was really good to catch up. And obviously we'll keep in touch.
Yeah. Always great to talk to you. Love you lots.
All right. Bye. Thank
Bye, Lise.
you.